Well, we're on.
Good morning, world. This is Steve Rao on P.O.D TV's World Edition. And on World Edition, we bring you great news from around the world, talk about sustainable innovation. I'm having some issues with my Wi-Fi, so please bear with me. Today, I wanted to talk about
How are you, Shaquille?
Guess he's not going to be able to talk.
He wants to talk about something. Well, let me start. I'd like to talk about the Olympics. Now, I'm no expert on swimming. I'm more of an expert on sinking. But I understand that the Australians have upset you Americans with a 0.04 second allowable little jump into the pool in the relay, which got us a gold medal.
No comment.
Because the news over here says that the Americans have had a bit of a whinge and have said it was straight up cheating, and the Olympic Committee says otherwise.
What? That they cheated?
Yes, we won it fair and square. Welcome back, Steve.
Yeah, I'm having some internet issues, guys. I'm on my beach vacation, so as I'm sipping my mimosa, welcome to World Edition. Sorry. I actually fell asleep as I was waiting for the thing. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties, guys. Welcome to the show. I'm going to go ahead and begin my monologue today, if that's okay, and we'll kick things off.
Absolutely.
Sure. Right. Well, sorry about that today. Well, welcome to World Edition. This is Steve Rao, your host, with Mark Lee and Nick Paladiva and the team here at IBM P.O.D TV, formerly IBM TV, World Edition. And on World Edition, we bring you great news from around the world, talk about innovation and what we can do to build back better and stronger from this pandemic. On Friday morning, we will have one of my former colleagues on the Morrisville Council, former Mayor Mark Stolman, to talk about professional cricket in Morrisville. We have our first professional team, the Morrisville Cardinals. He's going to be talking about USA cricket and what's going on in the world of cricket. But on that note, I want to continue our discussion on World Edition on democracy. We talked yesterday about the differences between liberal democracy and illiberal democracy, and the challenge of any democracy being not only to exist through elections, but how do you survive and thrive? And it's this balance between a strong state, which at the same time can honor the rights of citizens to express themselves, their own opinions, to have civil societies. That's what we call it, a liberal democracy. And I started thinking after I did my monologue yesterday, concerns I have about what's going on in other large democracies in the world, which we don't talk a lot about on World Edition. And it has to do with suppressing the rights of citizens to express their opposition and opinions against the government, which governs over them. Let's start with a few as I go over this monologue. First is India. India, the world's largest democracy, has about 800 million smartphones. Many people in their country depend on social media to get the word out about oxygen supplies. I'm sorry about the echo, guys. There's nothing. It's not on my end. Oxygen supplies, personal protective equipment, all kinds of things. They express their opinion. But Prime Minister Modi just passed a law that you can no longer express on Twitter or social media any opposition to what the government of India is doing, and that anything that threatens the sovereignty of India can be banned from the internet. Very, very serious blow for that democracy and hurts the citizens who govern it. Indonesia has followed suit. Nigeria, which President Trump agreed with, banned Twitter. And the Nigerian government, many people cannot even express their opposition to the government. And it goes on and on and on. Many of these illiberal democracies are having strong states, but suppressing the rights of citizens to express their opinions. What does this mean for the future of America, for example? Well, in America, Shaquille Latimer and I often have healthy debate, jabs, yes. But I want to defend him in this point. He has oftentimes defended his own opinions, representing his own views as an Australian, but also representing maybe the more moderate, centrist, or conservative stance of American citizens who support Donald Trump. But we have liberal groups and progressive groups also expressing many of their opinions on Twitter and social media. What happens is a divided government, a divided nation, the ability to have a comfortable conversation that drives policy and weakens the democratic institutions that we have in America. I do not believe we are going to be in a liberal democracy, but I definitely think American democracy, because of the threats and challenges of social media, is in a much weaker state than it was, let's say, 8, 9, 10 years ago. The point I'm making in this monologue before we begin is, what right does the government have to suppress the rights of citizens to express their very own opinions against the government which governs over them? Is this right? I don't know. I don't think so. More to come on this, but the bottom line is this. This is a conversation we need to have on World Edition because it's happening around the world right in front of our very own eyes. Democracy, does it exist for all of us? Here we go, folks, for our panel. We have from Down Under, Shaquille Latimer, Shasha Starr, Nick Paladiva will be joining us, and we look forward to having a guest on Friday on the world of cricket. Thank you for being with us, gentlemen.
You're welcome.
So anyway, this is a continued conversation. I'm sorry for the echo, guys. I don't know whether it's my end. I've tried everything.
The computer.
So
It's
Blame it
government.
on the computer.
I
Blame
think
it
it's
on
government.
technology. What?
what?
I think it's government, not.
Okay.
No.
Well, let's start with Shaquille Latimer, and then I want to go to Sasha Starr. But this whole notion of, this is something we don't talk a lot about on the show. The fact of the matter is, the point I was trying to make is that you get democratically elected governments that win their election, and then all of a sudden you're seeing in these democracies the ban of Twitter, the ban of internet, the ban of any social media, of anyone expressing their opinion against the government, which in many ways is making it harder for those democracies to do what they need to do, which is have a strong civil society. And it's that fine balance. So I'm going to start with Shaquille Latimer in terms of your opinion on this issue.
Well, look, I think it's well known that I don't think the abridgment of one's freedom of speech is ever justified. You can't yell fire in a crowded theatre, but the criticism of government is fundamental to making sure the government works properly. People being able to express their dissatisfaction is a really important part of keeping society together. But the other thing that I will say is that, from the political spectrum, and I know I've said this before on the shows, I don't understand the notion that some political parties or some politicians within political parties have, where they want to go to war with the other political party and basically destroy them. It's a really bad thing for America if the Republicans cease to exist. It's a really bad thing for America if the Democrats cease to exist. You need to have an inbuilt check and balance, which most countries have a two-party system. Most Western countries have a two-party system, and they act as a check and balance against each other, so that when centre-right parties tend to favour business and deregulation, and they can leave some people behind, and centre-left parties can focus on those people that are left behind, but they do so at the risk of maybe introducing too much regulation and complexity into the system. So by having two competing ideals competing with each other, I think that helps us to have a more coherent society that doesn't leave too many views unspoken. But the other thing I'll just want to quickly say about democracy, and this is much the same in Australia, but I think it's more prevalent in the United States. When you hear people like AOC threaten to primary people if they don't support something that she wants to pass through Congress, that is such an abuse of the system. The unfortunate thing about the democracy that you have in America is that who gets to represent a particular congressional district is determined by parties. They're not determined by the electorate. And who's going to show up to a local Democrat or local Republican meeting? Who's going to show up? It's very few people. They tend to be people who are very politically active within the parties. And what you end up having is party activists making decisions without there being any real reflection of what the people of that area are actually looking for. And we know this is the case with something like Eric Adams. As soon as he got the Democrat nomination, everyone had basically said he'd won the New York governorship, because they know that in really strong Democrat areas, whoever the Democrats put up is who's going to win it. In strong Republican areas, whoever the Republicans put up is who's going to win it. And what you end up seeing in elections, say the presidential elections, is it's really only determined by about 130 seats. That's just not right. That's a system that's been manipulated to such a degree that it no longer works the way it was intended to, and it's no longer reflective or representative, which is what it's supposed to be, a representative democracy. And I think that really needs to be, talked about, looked at, and there needs to be political change.
Fantastic. I mean, really good point, Shaquille Latimer. Sasha Starr, before we go to Mark Lee, what are your thoughts about this whole notion of, looking at the civil society needs of a strong democracy? And are we seeing a pattern here that in these countries like, Nigeria, Tunisia, Venezuela, India, even, which we don't talk a lot about, that democracies are being shut down because the people can't even express their opinion about the government? I mean,
Okay. If you take last two U.S. elections, I don't think that you can call them democratic at all. And I'll tell you why. Not because there were abuse of power or because the elections were stolen here and there. No, I don't have that in mind. What I have in mind is that democracy, ideally, it's when the people, or majority of people, better to say, they have certain ideas of what to do in next, say, 4 years, for example, and elect someone who is the best to represent these ideas and implement them. But that's not what happened in even 2016, for example. Did people have the ideas of doing the program what Trump brought to power and implemented? Absolutely not. First of all, don't forget that even 2016 he lost majority of votes. So it's not that he was there to represent will of majority of people of the United States. Not at all. Actually, he was not even representing Republican Party at the time, because except his ideas, there were 17 contenders. No one except Trump voiced these radical ideas of international politics and everything else. It was Trump himself. So essentially, not even democratic election in a way, but it was even anti-Republican election, because all these losers, they have to fall and just do whatever Trump said, and it became basically it's not democratic. It's not democratic. It's not Republican Party. It's nothing. It's just party of Trump. But now, since Trump is out of power and most likely will be indicted or so I just can't figure out even what it's all about. Where is that Republican Party is, and Democratic Party has its own huge problems from left to right, from top to bottom, any way you look at it. So what democracy has to do with this system, what you have now in the United States? None, or very, very, very little as possible, that you can even see it in the microscope. It's really, so you know what? The best practical way is just forget about this word democracy. There is no democracy in the United States of America. It's a country which is ruled by whoever wins election, and whoever wins election is one who has more money.
And that's a good point. Before we go to Mark Lee, go ahead, Mark Lee. But before I put the point is, America's republic has always been a strong state, but what we've done right is balance the need for expression, individual expression. But what Sasha Starr is saying is right. Something has changed where, and I'm sorry I'm agreeing so much with Shaquille Latimer today, but he's made some really good points. And I got to tell you, he's starting to grow on me a little bit, because there is a little bit more of a moderate streak inside me as well. Let's be honest.
Well, you're a moderate, and there's nothing wrong with being a moderate.
So I'm sorry we're not jabbing a lot, but I look at this more as a work session. But before I go to Mark Lee, I think Sasha has made some incredible points. First of all, the fact of the matter is that the political parties are dominating the conversation. And as Shaquille Latimer said, the extremes of each party are dominating the conversation. And so this has increased the division in America, which I think has weakened our ability to govern and even weakened our democratic institutions. So we've really become more we're on our way to becoming an illiberal democracy, because when someone says something, we disagree with it. So, I don't think it's as bad as people say. I still think America is still a great system because we can express ourselves. I can go out on the street and burn a flag, and the government can't say you're not allowed to do that. That is my right to burn a flag, right? I don't agree with it. I have the right to not pledge allegiance. I don't agree with that, believe it or not. As a Democrat, I don't think you should be able to burn a flag. I don't think you should go to the Olympics if you're not willing to stand on a podium and listen to the allegiance of the anthem.
Well, don't represent the country. Don't represent the country is a simple answer to that.
But Mark Lee, where do you stand on this? I mean, in terms of this discussion we're having today, before we get into some jabs.
No problem at all. Jabs are always good. I enjoy the jabs that you and Shaquille have when y'all have them. But the one thing I would say is as I was listening to both Shaquille and Sasha is that and you are right there bringing up some good points. But one of the problems that exists, and they've been talking about trying to get rid of it in the various ways, is that at the end of the day, the Republicans and the Democratic Party are being controlled by corporate lobbyists, and corporate lobbyists is actually part of the bigger problem, because definitely a lot of these lobbyists are representing interest, and these interests are pouring lots of money into their political campaign. So then they are kind of beholden to those interests and everything, and those interests are coming from all sides of the political spectrum. I don't care whether it's people in the environmental area like the Sierra Club, or whether it's some of the big Republican donors like the Cole brothers, or a number of other ones that exist. But then after they pour in all of this money and everything, you are more beholden to them than you are to the public that actually elected you. So definitely, I think that that's part of the problem that has existed. And there's been talk about trying to find ways to get, to still get that corporate money, but at the same time, not have them so tied to the politicians, because, that has definitely been a major issue that has existed and everything. Shaquille will be glad to know, because I'm probably one that was a little bit more to the liberal side, particularly when I was younger, and now would consider myself probably a little bit more liberal to moderate, but I was involved in Occupy. So I remember there being talks about the whole corporate America and the role that corporate America plays in the political spectrum and all of that. So definitely, that's been one of the things. There's even been talk about, like, are corporations citizens and things of that nature. And we know that corporations are not citizens, but that has been a rising conversation. One of the things that I heard, and I've got other friends that are not the biggest not the biggest AOC fans either, but one of the things that I heard.
You have friends that aren't Shaquille fans. Come on now.
No, I said I changed that. I didn't know that was a bad illusion and everything, but not AOC fans. That's what I was trying to say. They're not the biggest AOC fans, but one of the things that I was really impressed with, and I mean, it may be just one of those political tactics, but while she was talking about, and we brought it up here now a couple of times, the homeless situation, the fear that people face about evictions and things of that nature. AOC did not, and it was actually very much of a great move on her part, but she did not lay just the responsibility of what was going on at the feet of the Republicans. She actually said that there was a lot of blame to go around, and that the Democrats were just as much to be to blame as her Republican nemesis. So definitely she was laying a lot of the blame, not just at the feet of the Republican leadership, but she was also laying it at the feet of her own party, whether that was Pelosi, whether that was other people as well. So I was just impressed by the fact that she was being very open and very transparent in that sense. And a lot of times politicians are not transparent, that there was enough blame to go around on both sides. And I agree with her that if we're going to have these changes, whatever these changes are, we've got to be able to, as you oftentimes talk about, Steve, figure out ways that we can walk across the aisles and work together to solve these problems. And you can't solve them if you're not admitting your own part of the role and everything.
And before we get to the next, that's a good segue to talk what's going on. Okay, Shaquille, real quickly.
I just want to address a couple things. With AOC, I don't believe it. She calls out Democrats all the time when Democrats are not complete socialist, communist supporters or sympathizers. So she does that all the time for her own political ends. I don't agree with what Sasha said about Trump, to be honest, but I just want to I just want to address this thing about the political system being, as bent up as it is. The real problem that I see, it's not just that politicians are arguing and fighting. That's shouldn't be happening. I think there should be some changes made to how politics is done. But the idea that they're going to then take their divisive politics and try to extend it into other places, such as the Supreme Court, which is supposed to be another part of government, another branch of government, and to try to take away the independence of other branches of government in order to get your political way it's a travesty. And I think that usurps the sovereignty of American institutions, and it's something that should never have been attempted.
Yes, that's a good segue into what's going on in California. So, in the midst of the rise of COVID cases, burning, raging fires, the controversy of him coming out, unmasked at some kind of a wine party, there is a recall election now for Governor Gavin Newsom, who looks like he could be headed into some hot water. The last Republican governor that won a recall was Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator.
Married to a Kennedy.
Oh, yes, married to a Kennedy, Arnold. And Governor Schwarzenegger, won. And so what are your all thoughts about what's going on in California? It looks like, Newsom continues to – first of all, California is one of the few states that can have a recall election. I actually like the idea because I think it holds politicians accountable, in terms of let's have a recall, put it back on the ballot. If you're not happy with someone, what are your thoughts about this recall election? Legitimacy here? Is this guy in trouble?
Well, I'm not familiar. Shaquille, go ahead. I'm not familiar with the issue.
I certainly hope that he is, for the sake of California, because I think he's done an abysmal job. And not just him. There's actually also a recall for the LADA. I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong. Gascon. I think it is. And I actually think that his conduct is probably even more reprehensible than Governor Newsom's. But things like Governor Newsom going to the French Laundry, which I looked up the menu. It looks like a fantastic restaurant. I know that him and his group spent sort of 10 or 15 grand on dinner without masks in the private room. And while all the other Californians are being told to just sit at home and that kind of stuff, it's a completely unacceptable way to govern. And if you're going to be a political leader, then lead by example. Put yourself through the same pain as everybody else has to go through. There was a governor, I can't remember which state it was, but a governor who was it Whitmer, I think, who jumped on a private jet and flew down to Florida because she wanted to see a sick relative, while other people in her state couldn't leave. These sorts of things, they're hypocritical, they're unfair. Put yourself through the same things that everyone else is going through. The fact of the matter is that basically no executive government employees have lost a paycheck during the coronavirus pandemic, so they're living it up on the public purse while other people are struggling to survive. It's just not right. So I think that Governor Newsom should be held to account. I hope that California votes somebody else in. I don't think it's unbelievable to see California beginning to turn a little bit more red in frustration at some of the more ridiculous policies that they have over there.
Mark, what are your thoughts?
Well, like I said, I've been trying to follow the case, and Governor Newsom has definitely done some things that have been interesting in the sense of, make you even wonder whether he wanted to be governor in the first place based on some of the things that he's done that seem to be almost counterintuitive in the sense of trying to garner support and things along those lines. So I sometimes wonder if he's even trying to win a recall election. But, I would definitely say that from what I've understood of the history of California, with the exception of Arnold Schwarzenegger and maybe one or two other cases and everything, it has been very much of a strong Democratic hold. Of course, there are a lot of very liberal areas there in that very big state, but it's a big state. So I could see it, eventually flipping just as other states have done as well. But I mean, I don't know that it's going to happen this time. And like y'all have both mentioned, the one thing that Schwarzenegger had going for him is that, one, he was already a celebrity kind of in the ranks of Reagan and others that have had that time in the Hollywood system and things of that nature. And then he was married not just to a Democrat, but basically a Democrat that is a dynasty Democrat as well. So definitely have support in a lot of ways from both sides of the aisle because of that kind of alliance that they had put together through their marriage and everything of that nature. You know, I need to see who the other candidates are and if any of them have any strong chance against Mr. Newsom and all of that. But that would be the thing.
I think that if you have a look at the speech that Ronald Reagan gave for Barry Goldwater, Barry Goldwater's unsuccessful campaign against JFK, he actually was complaining in some degree about how left JFK was, and I have to tell you that as far as I can see, the Democrats today have moved so far to the left that if JFK was alive today, he'd be a Republican. There's no way, because he was fairly centrist and fairly moderate, and because the Democrats have moved so far to the left, people who previously were slightly centre-left or left-leaning, centrists, have now all of a sudden been labelled right-wing extremists, and they've got nowhere else to go but to the Republicans. And I think you've lost a lot of the middle class because of it.
Speaking of Republicans and Democrats working together, interesting that looks like we're making headway on the infrastructure bill. $63 billion for broadband, $73 billion for the modernizing the power grid. Do you guys think there's something we're going to pass this thing? It looks like it's got some legs. I'm excited. Yo, President Biden making it happen with the Republicans.
It sounds like it's definitely something that is something that both parties can agree are needed. I mean, as Shaquille has pointed out a couple of times, because of his trips from Australia to here and everything, our roads are not in the best of shape in compared to some of other parts of the world. Our bridges are not in the best of shape. We definitely need some sort of thing going on with broadband and with some of the other technology things that are out there in terms of the digital divide and other things that are very much needed. So this is one of them cases where I think that both parties can agree on the need for it, and therefore I'm not surprised that we're seeing a move towards it. I think the end of the day, it's going to be a matter of the cost factor and where they agree on the cost factor and which one of these items that we all agreed we need will get the bigger amount of the money. I mean, I've heard of everything from charging stations to more kind of green energy and some other things that definitely people will be looking for, and some people will be excited about it and others won't be. So I do think that we will get an infrastructure bill passed. It's just going to be a matter of what the context of that infrastructure bill is going to be and all of that and what gets in there. I know that, they're definitely sticking in and putting in on both sides of the aisle some different kinds of pork, because I'm sure that they want to get their people to get.
I should hope that Congress will be making very, very sure there's not earmarks in that bill. But let me just say that not is there pork in the bill, but we often wonder how can they read some of these things that they want to pass? Of course, it's just an open knowledge now. Everyone knows that they don't bother to read it. I think that everything they pass should be read on the Senate floor and on the House of Reps floor before they pass and vote on it, and they should actually vote on each individual item and justify each little bit of it. That had never happened, but that's what they should do. I find it astounding that what they've now done is just gone, we're not reading them anyway, so who cares? Let's have a vote to pass a bill, open the pages. Oh, we haven't written the bill yet. Yes, there's precedence for it, but to actually submit a bill with blank pages where the bill hasn't even been written and then ask for a vote on the floor, that is absolutely absurd. And how could any politician at all in DC expect Americans or the rest of us around the world that look at America as a great bastion of freedom and hope for the rest of us, how are we supposed to actually have faith in these politicians when they do that? Here's a blank piece of paper. We'll write the bill later. Let's vote on whether or not we should pass it. Come on.
You have to be extremely naive not to understand that the choice here is between bad and very bad outcome. Because if the bill is accepted and it will go through, we're talking about new billions and $500 billion to be put on the line. Then what's happened with this money? How much of that will go into really infrastructure projects? how much money there will be simply stolen, misused, and therefore there is very little point of cheering for this idea. It's better if this bill would never be around at all. Or
I think Sasha, the American people deserve better from their political leadership than a choice between bad and very bad, and that's the problem.
but this is exactly the case. First of all, the amount is not enough to do a real infrastructural projects what's needed. Now, if the money would be enough, then the best way to deal with it is outsource it to Chinese. They have experience, know-how, they know how to build infrastructure projects inexpensively, efficiently. In America, in my opinion, right now, it would be even difficult to find basic trades, electricians, people who know how to work, who have experience how to work. I think America is lacking that and would be unable to do real infrastructure projects with or without money, of course.
And yes, I mean, and I think, go ahead, Mark.
No, I was actually going to bring it and toss it back to you, Steve, because one of the things that I've been curious about is that if you watch the debate around the infrastructure, if you hear the conversations around the infrastructure, I think the reason that the public as well as the politicians themselves are excited about the infrastructure is because there's this belief that it's going to create a lot of jobs. And that is one of the things that we know we need in order for the economy to rebound from the pandemic that we've been in the last year and a half and everything. So that's one of the things that a lot of people are talking about, is that it's going to create more jobs, and there'll be jobs that will be created here in the United States, because you're going to need people that are going to be working on those road crews. You're going to need people that are in that space and everything to actually build the broadband, and we're going to be putting broadband out there and everything. And by the way, I don't know if y'all caught the show yesterday or not, but there's a gentleman, Adriana Martanica, who is definitely a part of a technology group that was on the show that I did yesterday. And he was actually arguing the fact that, you know, all this talk about bringing broadband and fiber is wonderful and everything. But at the end of the day, maybe we need to be bringing basic DSL into the picture as well, because he's thinking that a lot of people that are in other areas of the country, they don't necessarily have the access to some of the bigger kind of things that are out there. So he was actually arguing that DSL is a part of what needs to happen as well. And, you know, that might be like going back to the, you know, the T cars and everything, as opposed to like the fancy cars that we have now. But I understand.
Oh, hang on. Most Australians are still on ADSL. Thank you very much. So just don't be too mean to ADSL connections.
Well, let's not forget
that's part of what he was saying, was that we need to do that and everything. And he was even bringing up how some, you know, he was not being, he was being very transparent. And I love transparent guests and everything, because he was talking about how in certain cities that he's approached, and he was actually in North Carolina till he ran into some immigration issues. And this is a guy from Slovakia, so we're not talking about somebody from Latin America, but he actually had to move to his other home outside of Slovakia, which is Canada. So he's now living in Toronto, Canada, and everything, because apparently he made a very interesting mistake, and he even acknowledges that, and he's talked about it in the press, which is that, you know, in order to have these special visas, you have to, like, you know, fill your paperwork in time and everything. But he was so busy trying to get these computers to the kids that need them and everything that, you know, he literally forgot by a day or two to get the paperwork in time. So
I watched that.
He's now out of the area and everything, and trying to work on getting one of these special visas again to come back into North Carolina, where his parents live, and where now that he and his sister are in Canada, in Toronto, and are trying to find out. But he's still running his company from over there, and of course with the assistance of his parents. And this was a very young gentleman. He's 30 years old, and his sister is 25, and all of that. But they're still doing the work that they need to be doing and all of that. But he was talking about the bureaucracy that he's run into, as he's even been trying to bring, not even in the immigration side, but just trying to bring the computers to the kids. And a lot of times people were giving him these crazy roadblocks about finances and everything else that was going on, instead of understanding that what he was trying to do was actually bring a much needed product to folks that needed it.
So I watched that show last night, and I just wanted to, you know, it's a rhetorical question, but He's made a mistake and he's missed his deadline by 17 days, I think is what he said. So he's had to go back up to Canada and then reapply. How does somebody like him feel, who's trying to do things the right way, who's made a mistake, and is trying to rectify that mistake? How does someone like him feel about other people just disregarding the laws, crossing the border, in they come?
We did not get to that, but that is a legitimate question. We are friends on LinkedIn. I will make it a point to ask him that question because I am not going to sit there and answer the question.
I said it was a rhetorical question. That was just to make the point that I'm making, and I've made before. That when everyone talks about immigration, let these people in, all that sort of stuff, the humanity. There are other people who are also trying to apply to come to America, whose applications are pushed back because these people are essentially jumping to the front of the queue. Okay, they're given court dates, and they don't show up to it. They go to sanctuary cities. Nobody does anything about it. And then you've got other people that are trying to come into America legitimately, who are faced with bureaucracy, who are faced with all this red tape. And if they make a mistake, and it's not even a mistake like he made where he missed his renewal date, it could be a mistake on your application. Somebody's filled something out incorrectly or whatever. And so in order to try to make sure you don't make those mistakes, you end up paying immigration lawyers to make sure everything's in order. And it can be a really costly process. And those people that try to do things the right way are actually being disadvantaged for the sake of people that try to do things the wrong way. That makes absolutely no sense to me. I'm sure Nick thinks it's brilliant, but I think it makes no sense. I'm trying to go Nick to come back on.
Yeah.
You managed.
It worked. You got it back on.
The Hulk is here. What are you talking about, Shaquille? I mean, this is blatantly
I'm
obvious.
having some Wi-Fi issues again. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah,
the thing is,
I might be going out again, so I may want to begin my closing monologue earlier.
He's so out of control.
But I think my thing is that we didn't get, first of all, I think in terms of infrastructure, it's really about the execution of that infrastructure. And the fact of the matter is, we got to spend more money. We spent 3% of our GDP in the 1950s on innovation and science, and it led to a lot of great things in the United States. I think we have to commit that we're going to share a percentage of our GDP on infrastructure, and it does create jobs.
Not.
Yeah, but we need to create jobs.
No, that is the most dreadful idea. Right, this infrastructure bill is being tolerated by people on the centre right because, hey, you're in the middle of a pandemic and a federal response makes sense. What should we spend the money on? Yes, we should spend it on infrastructure. When I say we, I mean you guys. That makes sense, okay? But let's just remember, infrastructure is generally a state issue. And, where do you have the worst roads in America? Are places like New York, Democrat run. Right, you have a look at all the wealthy Democrat places, and you have a look at the infrastructure, and it's been left to rot. Okay, while a handful of people in charge of unions and a handful of people in charge of the Democrats walk off with all the money. So what you want to now do is you now want to say, let's commit a certain percentage of the federal budget, of the federal GDP, to infrastructure to pay for the mismanagement of Democrat-run cities and states.
We got it right.
And to actually take the money off the hard-working people in Republican states.
May he rest in peace. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he's watching down from heaven. Believe it or not, you're the prince of your party, Ronald Reagan, was a supporter of FDR. Okay, and he was out there campaigning for him.
I love how you like to focus on some bits of history. Now, look, Roosevelt did a lot of great things, but you know what? There was no call, even in the worst parts of the Great Depression. There was no call for social safety nets, for Social Security, for Medicare. There was no calls for that. The people didn't ask for that. Okay, and the Great Depression was caused by what? The repulsive capitalists? No, it was caused by the Fed. It was caused by the Fed.
Wait a minute, Shaquille. Some of the greatest programs that came out of America in terms of safety nets came out of the New Deal. So I don't know that we can say that they did not involve.
So when you say safety net, right? And I said this on the show yesterday, not the World Edition, but the other show yesterday, Economics Monday. if you want socialism, you can have a two-tiered system. Have socialism for the bottom half of the people that think that government should use force and provide all services, because they can have socialism and the government can tell them, you're not sitting on your ass at home, you're not sitting on the street corner dealing drugs or having kids while you're on drugs, you're going to get a job. And if you can't find one, we'll find work for you. That way we get the same economy, the same benefits that's what they have in China, okay, with a big booming economy. You could do that. But if you're going to try and say it's a safety net for you to use government to force me to hand over my hard-earned money so that somebody else can sit on their ass and do nothing, that's not good enough. Helping people in financial distress, helping people who are vulnerable, absolutely. I fully support.
But that's what some of those programs were that were created. And I'm not thinking that there weren't abuses of some of those systems in terms of like the welfare system and a couple of other systems that were very much abused